Nobody wants to talk about death. Nobody wants to discuss it. It is the elephant in the room. We can talk about sex and politics, but we don't want to talk about death. We have to, as a society, really think about what we're going to do for the future, because at some point the gas is going to run out. You cannot get the temperatures for electric cremation. What do we do?
This documentary is the beginning of the end and the beginning of a new funeral system. Now, let's talk about death.
Hello, my name is Lillian Blake Wilkinson O'Dwyer, and I am an artist, and I paint about a range of subjects, but mainly about death and the eventualities that come afterwards and before the call. I've done paintings about my actual death, and in terms of imagery, I've painted my own funeral. It was sort of the Victorian style, it's sort of quite traditional Gothic. I think that's something that plagues the European aesthetic around it. It lingers in the Victorian era, it hasn't really stretched beyond that point. It's sort of very romantic, lacy, black crow aesthetic, and it hasn't really evolved since then. So my idea for my funeral was everyone to be dressed in Victorian garb, a bit lazy goth. The rest of the aesthetic around there is usually like faceless people who exist between the realms, shadow people who I think everyone has seen at least once.
I think art is important, very important in this respect, so we do have time to go and contemplate and immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of death in order that we think about it properly. And I think art has got a very profound manner of helping us to do that. And I think everybody's way of thinking about it will be different. Everybody will want something different. Some people may like skulls and crossbones to think about it. Some may like other imagery. Personally, I like the imagery of a falling leaf from a tree. I think it's very profound. I think it's profound in the sense that life is transient. There's beauty in death as well, and also that it's the type of ashes to ashes type of idea, that the tree was created from the ground, the leaf was created from the ground, and the sun and the air, and it falls back to that, it falls back to the ground, and it turns back into dust. So, and also there's an amazing beauty just about sitting and watching a leaf fall. The whole universe can be found in a falling leaf. Just the beauty of that and the idea of death.
Shadow people are sort of the space in between life and death. That's a very powerful image for me. Everything is death symbol if it's used in the right context. But art symbolises forever, it's the soul. And so they don't want that in the funeral establishments because they're trying to put out the message, but that's where it stops, and that's where death is nothing. Why would you have everything?
As an artist, as a designer, as a teacher, I talk about death a lot in my classes because it's almost such a taboo subject, and children are much more perceptive and less scared of it. I guess because it's so far away, even though they've lost, some of them have lost parents, some of them have lost animals, obviously, and pets, whatever, grandmothers, grandfathers. But it's easier to talk to them about it than it is to talk to adults.
Because people are scared of the unknown. And it's like having children at funerals. It's really important, because if you don't, they're going to be scared of the unknown.
I was thinking recently about some things that I've done, and death being beautiful. I photographed both of my parents, not together, obviously, they didn't die together, but 7 years, 8 years, probably 10 actually between. Yeah, Mum died earlier last year, and I took some photographs of her in her coffin, and as I did when she was still in her bed, just after she died. I was there when she died, and it was incredible feeling. Even though you know someone's going to die, especially a mum, and the shock was just really surprised me. And I just looked at her, and she looked so peaceful. But I know it's a bit of a cliche, but she actually looked completely free of anxiety and stress and worry. And the first time in all the time I knew her, that was when she looked most peaceful, and I just wished she could have found that peace in her life, and I don't think a lot of people do. But I put her beautiful, one of her most favourite scarves on her, and put flowers, sweet peas, around her head. She loved sweet peas, and they were a special flower from me and Mum. And I made her, you know, I didn't make her look beautiful. She was beautiful, and I just photographed her as she was, and it was wonderful. I also photographed Dad. My siblings weren't so enthralled by the idea, and didn't really understand why, even though they're all artists and musicians. It was, I don't know, it was something that was particular to me, I think.
The beauty of the rancidness, it's a fine balance with death, because there's a lot of beauty in sort of romanticism and the horror about the last breath and the final moments, and the initial thoughts. There's sort of a weirdly glamorised in it, like doing my makeup to look like death with her. And it's got a beautiful, serene image, but then when the rotting kicks in and the maggots start out, it's not so pretty anymore. And that's when it starts to become disgusting and strange, to me anyway. I mean, there's videos, and I've seen too many now, it sort of sticks in your head. But that's the abstraction from human. When someone becomes mulch, they're no longer, it's hard to imagine them as ever even existing, they're just arriving or decay. So it's hard to find beauty in that, but you can easily picture there's a strange beauty in that. But then it's weird, because that's like the half gap. The decay is the disturbing thing, because there's beauty in skeletons and the purity of the whiteness, things like the crispness, the final form, the jelly mulching in between, and the guts and the gore. I think that reminds people that they are going to die. When you see someone that's fully dead or has just died, they're abstractions and they're sort of still present. When you see the middle ground of someone actually going through that process and mulching down into shit, that hits your mortality spot and you're like, oh fuck, that's gonna be me. And it's just fucking, that really makes mortality real, I think. It's disturbing.
So yeah, death, I think it is beautiful, and I think you know, things like taxidermy, and you know, one of my favourite paintings from Mille is Ophelia, and I think it's lots of people's favourite painting, and yet it's a portrait of a dead woman. You know, I think it's kind of, I think artists give us that ability to see beauty in death. I don't think we probably would in so many other ways. But yeah, taxidermy, I mean, you know, and the Victorians in their family portraits, if one of the children had died, they'd dress them up and put them back into the photograph to have their last family photograph. So even though they were dead, there's a lot of children died in Victorian times, and they always wanted them to be there. So they used to dress them up and put the little corpses in the middle of the family photographs, which I think is lovely. But you can't imagine people doing that now. They would find that really disturbing, but I just think it's beautiful. And you just wonder how many family photographs of Victorian people you look at and you think, makes you think how many of them were actually really even alive. Also find skeletons just absolutely incredibly beautiful, and often wish there's this fantastic practice called scrimshaw, which my brother, because I've always drawn on bones and you know, sheep bones and skulls and things. I really love the idea of drawing on bones or writing on bones. I'd love to write on my own. I'd love to be able to do that. I don't know how that would ever be possible, but I love the idea of doing that. Anyway, scrimshaw, if we were allowed to keep the bones of our loved ones and make drawings into them and engrave them, and it would just be a wonderful thing, but we're not, you know, there's so many things that stop us from doing that.
The news is sort of thing trying to be put in place in terms of using human bodies as fertilizer, not them down. I think that sort of steps too far in a way, because surely the problem shouldn't be, I mean, the solution to the problem shouldn't be desecrating the dead, it should be stopping the initial horror that creates that. The utilisation of the body for the great good can never be for the greater good, because it comes from darkness. There's no celebrating the soul or the light. Seeing it as a material. I don't know, the lump of cheese being put in the sandwich is material. It's just like, there's no celebrating or glorifying the soul, and the absence of the soul if you're just harvesting bodies to meet your own ends. It's just what? It's not like a carrot or anything, it's a human life. Utilising it for a systematic purpose that isn't necessary, because there's other solutions to these problems.
Things like acclimation, if I said to you, well, you know, you're going to be put into a vat, you're going to have alkali solution poured over you, and that alkali solution goes down the drain, you're not going to like that.
The idea that we put back into the earth what we take out. Number one, that we shouldn't take out more than what we should. And number two, that whatever we do take out, we put back into the ground. Whether that be the ground, or whether that be water, or whether that be space, I don't know. For me, fire, air and water has got meaning. So maybe our bodies should go back to fire, air and water somehow. I'm not suggesting that cut off your head, cut off the torso, cut off your leg and put a little bit of here, burn one, drown another. And
utilising a body is fertilizer. It's such an industrial move. It's such a communist move. Just for the greater good, for the there's no sovereignty there. There's a different way of utilising a body. It naturally goes back to the earth. It's not treated like fertilizer to go back into the earth. That's a perversion of something beautiful.
I like the idea of having burial grounds where people can be buried vertically, like an oak forest or something. So every time you're buried vertically in the ground with a tree. So you all become a forest. you know, and the tree becomes your headstone somewhere for people to go and talk to you and hug you and things.
So I think art is important, very important in this respect. So we do have time to go and contemplate and immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of death in order that we think about it properly. And I think art has got a very profound manner of helping us to do that. And I think everybody's way of thinking about it will be different. Everybody will want something different. Some people may like skulls and crossbones to think about it. Some may like other imagery. Personally, I like the imagery of a falling leaf from a tree. I think it's very profound. I think it's profound in the sense that life is transient. There's beauty in death.
I think the utilising of the body in a creative aspect would make sense to a degree. I don't think straight after someone's died, unless they've given express permission to art, then that's the final wish. That's respecting that. But art comes from the soul. If you're using body to decorate something, that's not art, that's sick. And I know I've got very prescriptive views and black and white or whatever, but that's just how I think. But I think art comes from the soul. If you bury someone in the woods, they're obviously going to go into the trees and into the mushrooms. That's just how things work. If burying someone under a lawn is only going to profit the lawn and the surrounding areas, which is completely useless. That's not how the system has been designed. The system has been designed the way it gives that to the plant. So we should be buried in our natural countryside that we have. Restricted up the fucking ability to sectioned up into these death zones that are allowed. You know, for millennia we lived in the land and we died in the land, we grew the land and we hunted the land and we were probably in our brother's land, do you know what I mean? But they grew the butternut squash and that's what you had to do for tea. And it was a really beautiful system, that's just how reality works. And that's been taken from us because everything beautiful and natural in this system is compartmentalised and distorted, and it's exaggerated into a caricature, a horrible caricature of what it naturally is, and how God has made it. And I don't mean like Christian God or maybe I don't have any more to be fair, but there's this big guy out there sorting it all out. We all know with our instincts what is right and wrong fundamentally. We all feel the pull towards the pure and the light and the soul to actions. And I think you can feel the dark and you can be absorbed in it and love it and be drawn to it, and that's great as well, you know, as long as you're aware of it and all art. So with death, it's best to focus on the light. It's the best way to treat you instead of utilising them for various ends.
us viewing death and thinking about death by looking at a cross, by looking at Jesus on the cross and looking at death in that way. So it's not our own death, it's somebody else's death that determines how we live our life. Whereas the Stoics, they used the idea of death, going into tombs, going into catacombs, going into these places in order to remind us of our own death, which I think is very important. And thank you, Emily, for asking me these questions, because I hadn't really given it a great deal of thought. And over time, over the last few days, I have given it quite a lot of thought. So the idea that religion is based around belief, which is based around doubt, and faith over doubt. I mean, I can't see that, because, you know, we don't ultimately know where our lives are going, where our death is going. And I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to live in fear of what might happen when we die, because somebody has told us that, because how on earth do they know? I prefer the Stoic philosophy in respect of we should look at some type of imagery to remind ourselves of our own demise, in order that we think deeply about death, which in the same way as religion does, makes us think deeply about our lives, but they just do it in different ways. Which brings us around to the art. I think art is quite important if we want to make sure we think about death. And over the last few days, I've realised how important it is to really think about it. Not about how we transcend, not about what happens when we die, because
just if we can like have the planet in absolute harmony, and we transcend individual thoughts, but we as a collective, again I'm talking telepathy, but we can transcend like our needs and put it for the greater good, for the future, for the generations to come, and we just live so perfectly clean and everything's just transcended. So transcendence upon transcendence, transcendence of transcendence, maybe.
Beautiful, yeah.
That was best.
Okay, is that enough? Thank you.
Welcome.
life is transient. There's beauty in death as well, and also that it's the type of ashes to ashes type of idea, that the tree was created from the ground, the leaf was created from the ground, and the sun and the air, and it falls back to that, it falls back to the ground, and it turns back into dust. So, and also there's an amazing beauty just about sitting and watching a leaf fall. The whole universe can be found in a falling leaf. Just the beauty of that, and the idea of death makes us realize that our lives are not, well, that they are transient. But for me as well, it's the ecological side of it, the environmental side of it. It's how things should be done. We live, we fall to the ground, and we're put back into the earth in order to grow again. And I'm not saying that our consciousness will relive, because I don't know. How do we know? It's nice to think that. It's nice to have a belief that tries to allay the fear inside us, which is what belief systems are all about. It's just to try and, well, if they're created by a control system, they're designed to control how we live our lives. But if they're designed by a system which is not predominantly after control, for example Buddhism, then it just tells us how we should live our life and experience the beauty, experience the transient nature of the birth and the death, because they're all part of the same thing. I don't like beliefs, but if I was allowed a belief, then the circular manner of all things, the circular manner of all of the cycles on the earth, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the birth and death cycle, the up and the down, the long and the short, all of these cycles, they're not opposites, they're all part of the same thing, going round and round and round, with the end being the same as the beginning. And if we took our ideas about life in that way, then we could maybe understand better. And I think to those ends that an environmental funeral, an environmental transcendence, well, no, not an environmental transcendence, because the transcendence is the idea of the consciousness going somewhere, which we don't know, we have no idea. But so, I hope I've covered a lot of things there, but there's one aspect of it which I think I haven't covered, and that is the, what should happen when we die, and I think that's very important for the descendants, the relatives and the people we leave behind, and I think that's very important for, as we go into our tombs and think about death, we should think about that type of thing. Who is left behind? Maybe how we should be remembered, and not live our lives in order to be remembered in a good way, but live our lives in order to be unique, in order that we're known about to the people that are left behind, so they have some type of imagery to remind us. Personally, I don't really like very much the idea of skeletons and bones as reminders. When we talk about the body and what happens to it, I think that's quite a sacred thing in a way. I mean, I'm not saying we should be buried with coffins and expensive things and taking up too much of the planet's resources in order to do that, but I think something should be dead and then left. I'm not quite sure why we look at everything so sacred in terms of churches and burials and graveyards, and yet we go on to ancient tombs and don't have a second thought about digging them all up and presenting sarcophagi in museums and things like that. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think we should be left alone and left to memory. I hope that covers everything. Makes us realize that our lives are not, well, that they are transient. But for me as well, it's the ecological side of it, the environmental side of it. It's how things should be done. We live, we fall to the ground, and we're put back into the earth in order to grow again. And I'm not saying that our consciousness will relive, because I don't know. How do we know? It's nice to think that. Which is what belief systems are all about. It's just to try and, well, if they're created by a control system, they're designed to control how we live our lives. But if they're designed by a system which is not predominantly after control, for example Buddhism, then it just tells us how we should live our life. Both of these ideas are quite interesting, but the religious ideas, especially Christianity, is based on us viewing death and thinking about death by looking at a cross, by looking at Jesus on a cross and looking at death in that way. So it's not our own death, it's somebody else's death that determines how we live our life. whereas the Stoics, they used the idea of death, going into tombs, going into catacombs, going into these places in order to remind us of our own death, which I think is very important. And thank you, Emily, for asking me these questions, because I hadn't really given it a great deal of thought. And over time, over the last few days, I have given it quite a lot of thought.
Fabulous questions. Lots of food for thought. You invigorated lots of really exciting ideas in my head about things I can do with my idea of death and things that I've thought about for a long time, as an artist, as a designer. I made some drawings when Dad died, and drawings after he died, after he'd been cremated, and I used some of the ashes to make some drawings. I made 5 drawings. One was the darkest and the most, I suppose, full of just fear and rage and all the things that I'd talked to him about in his life and discussed, and the horrendous things in life that we often talked about. And as those conversations came into my head, and I moved on to the next drawing, and they got fainter and fainter. And the last drawing was, he was barely there, and I felt like, that was like, I mean, it sounds obvious, but he was disappearing as a voice to me. Only in as much as, I still talk to him a lot and discuss things. Obviously, I can't discuss them because discussion involves more than one person, but I talk to him and I feel great comfort in that. And usually to the sky at night, he told me he was going to live on Mars a long time before it became suddenly fashionable. But yeah, he was packing just before he died, and I said, "Are you going somewhere?" And he said, "Yes, I'm going to Mars." I said, "Oh, Dad, that's amazing." I think it was only 2 days after that the first proper camera landed there. When you think about cremation, I know we'll come on to that later. The horrible thing about it is the fact that the body doesn't completely burn, so the bones are all left over, and then they put them through these ghastly machines that, like twig strippers or crunchers, and they all splinter up, and then they reburn them, and the whole process is really quite vile. It's kind of what you would do with rubbish, I know both my parents were cremated, but it wouldn't have been my first choice. I would much have preferred to have buried them, even vertically, so it uses less earth, and then a tree to be planted so that the roots can completely contain them and draw all that incredible energy from them, all that goodness and wealth of information, I like to think. So yeah, I would like to be able to do things like that. You asked about what I've, memento mori. It's a lovely thing, and I think there's some beautiful people have done beautiful things, with people's hair and just with their ashes, and with various other just things that they've kept, and made coats out of all their old or all their favourite clothes, or there's loads and loads of things. Personally, I've written lots of letters and done drawings for people to give, for someone to give to them after I've died. Just things that I don't know whether I'll ever have the chance to say to them, or feel it's even important to at the moment, but I'd like them to know things, or my, oh God, sorry, we're falling down here. Anyway, yeah, I've done that, and I was talking to my daughter today, the fabulous Lil. We've talked about death. Oh, sorry about that. We've talked about death together many times. A lot about her own death and her funeral and music and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, I'm having real trouble with this. I'm trying to balance it on the edge of a caravan sofa. Not the best idea. Anyway, yeah, carry on. It should stay a bit. Yeah, so we've had lots of discussions about, funerals, and which is a really painful thing. I don't think she understood quite how painful that was for me to talk to her about it, but she always made it funny, so that was it was lovely. Actually, it was lovely that it was so open and that we could, have a bit of a laugh about it as well. But yeah, I had a lovely idea whilst sort of thinking about this, and I had a chat with Lil today about it, and I just love the idea of eternal drawings. So I'm going to take one of my mum's drawings, who was an absolute genius with a pen. She was brilliant. Her drawings were absolutely extraordinary. And I'm going to draw into them, into one or two of her drawings, and then keep them. And then after I die, Lil can take them and draw into them and pass them on to whoever she wants to. And so the drawing becomes eternal, an eventual. I don't know how. Or maybe it has been done before. I don't know, but it just was such a lovely idea, and I really love the idea of that. Okay, I'm gonna move on to. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes because I wrote loads of notes down. Oh, that was an incredible artist called. Well, he was actually a scientist, Gunther von Hagen. I'm sure you've heard of him. He invented something called plastination, where he treated the inside, the interior, under the skin, flesh and muscles and bones and just complete under the skin parts of human beings, and put them together in an extraordinary exhibition in Brick Lane, which I had the wonder of going to see, which was just incredible. I mean, I know it had a lot of there was a lot of taboo about it, but it was an extraordinary thing, and I think we're all fascinated by it, and it was just incredible just to look at a human being without the skin on. It's just like, wow, we are absolutely extraordinary, and the muscles and the veins, and it was stunning and unbelievable. So yeah, I think there's a great value to looking at death and looking at things when they're dead. And I mean, look, all those wonderful drawings that Leonardo da Vinci did, and I mean, what have we benefited from people dissecting dead people and drawing and animals and plants and extraordinary things that we've learned from that, and shown how absolutely beautiful we are underneath, as well as and the sort of cliched, stereotypical structures that we're forced to align ourselves with. The other thing, dehumanizing corpses. I was reading about, which is quite another subject, necrophilia, which I find fascinating. I have to say, I find it fascinating and really disturbing as well, I have to say, but fascinating nevertheless. And a fact that I found out was it only became illegal in England in 2003, which is, yeah. I was talking to Lil about that today. Yeah, we talk a lot about stuff. And she was like, oh, it probably happened that some politician was shagging his dead wife, and from that point on they probably thought it wasn't a good idea. But if he did, I don't know. Is it that bad? I don't know. I think people do much worse things to living corpses, living humans, the living. There we go. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next one. I'm not sure about transcendence. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think I'd like to be buried, and I love the idea of, you moved on to, I'm just talking about this, I think they're both connected, this thing about mushrooms and fungi being able to eat your corpse and take all that energy and make it. And they are extraordinary little living creatures. I'd love to become part of their world. So yeah, I have no problem with that at all. Yeah, transcendence. I'm not sure about fire and water. I think that's for others to enjoy. I love the idea of I love the gypsy tradition of somebody being, they're burned in their caravan with all their worldly goods, and that's their demise, and that becomes and that all those ashes go into the earth, and I love that. There's lots of Romany traditions that I think are really beautiful about death and life. Anyway, yeah, so the transcendence thing. I quite like the idea that people could be buried in their own gardens. I don't know that there's anything too wrong with that if you can do that with your pets. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to be buried in your own garden, but I guess there's a problem if it's if then it's sold on and you get left behind. What do I want people to know about me after I die? Well, I've written all those letters. I think probably they will know from my art, or from bits, things that I've written or drawings that I've made, and if anyone's interested. But I can't. It's not for me to say, really, is it? I'll let them think whatever they think about me when I've gone. I don't think it really bothers me, but yeah, I think I like the idea of preserving my daughter's life for after her death, but not. Hopefully, I won't be there to see that. But if somebody close to me dies, I find it really endearing and engaging to pay homage to them in some way. Make sure that they're remembered significantly. I'm really interested in putting a book together about my mum, because she was a phenomenal artist, and I think there's an awful lot of incredible people that are just left by the wayside because somebody hasn't taken the time to make something of them. All those years of making work and being a mum, and it's extraordinary. So yeah, I hope some of that is helpful. As I say, I could talk to you for hours, my dear, and I hope to sometime in the future. Good luck with everything, and yeah, you can edit all this crap out, but see you soon. Love you.
It's facing reality.
It's not. Death is not a morbid conversation.
It's not. It's reality. Death is an integral part of life, isn't it?
Great. Now I've got a gigantic fart noise in the background. Thanks, Andy. What did the doors say, Charles?
Well, from a Doors Jim Morrison lyric, no one here gets out alive. There's a title of a biography which I read in my early 20s, and it's called that. No one here gets out alive.
Do you think your consciousness goes somewhere afterwards?
That's a very good question, Emily. I sometimes like to pick someone like Alan, who's read a lot of Asian sort of mysticism, he believes, I think he does believe that the consciousness survives. I don't believe in a sort of father-like, God-like thing or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think I never really thought about it that much, Emily, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know, I suppose it's beyond it. I don't know, to be honest. I'm very much on the fence about what happens to us after life, you know, after when we die, you know. I don't want to be dismissive and say nothing, we're just dead meat, you know. At the same time, I haven't got much of a faith either, you know. I don't want to be dismissive, you know.
Because it's unknown, and the unknown is limitless to what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
What about the final choice that you get to make? The final choice of what you do with your body after death? Do you think that that makes any difference?
What your dead body?
Yes, so for example, cremation.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I remember John, who was the electrician, and he said, I find being cremated too violent. I'd rather be buried.
Too violent?
I mean, I think we should donate our organs to research, really. Don't you think? A bit squeamish.
So use our bodies for the greater good?
Yes. My liver might be quite interesting.
Might be mutated. Do you know that cremation expends 400 kilograms of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere?
I didn't know that, actually.
And we're actually running out of burial space too.
So what's the answer then?
Aquamation?
What does that mean?
Aquamation is the body's put into a pressurised tank.
Oh, yes.
And then water strips the body of all of the flesh and all of the soft tissue. And it's turned into amino acids, salts and sugars.
Oh.
Do you think that
It's also... I mean... Okay, well, I think... I don't know. I mean... Okay, well, if that's better for the environment, so be it. That's probably something for the future.
or for now?
Or for indeed the present, yes.
They do it in America.
Do they?
Mhm.
Yes. They do all sorts of things in America, don't they?
So you want to give your body to science?
Well, I don't see why not, really. I don't want any weed.
Is there any like
Sorry.
is there any like particular pieces of artwork that makes you come to terms with death and our mortality more?
No. I've got loads of memories, you know, sweet memories. Sort of, I call them photographs of
It's
the
alright,
mind.
she hasn't got enough.
Photographs of the mind, you know. My memory is like a photograph album. You know, you have an aesthetic. You remember the aesthetic beauty of certain moments in life. You know, that seems to have an eternal quality. You know what I mean? You know.
Memories are eternal.
Yes.
You got it. My lights up.
There you go. So what do you think about aquamation? Do you think it's
Yes, if it helps the environment, why not? Why not?
At what stage do you think it's dehumanizing?
I don't think it's really dehumanizing. I think well, you've got to take care of the people, the beloved. I'm sorry. I think obviously you have to consider the people that love you. They want, you know, they like to give you pay their respects or give you a send off or call it what you will, and
So you would say that your death is more important to others than you?
no, well, no, but sometimes you have to think who you're leaving behind. Do you know? Particularly if you've got kids and stuff.
Are you religious?
No, I'm not. I always found I always found church very boring. I hated singing hymns and things. I found it very embarrassing, actually.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1960.
So I guess that was when religious funerals was at its peak.
I was christened, you know, but my parents never went to church. It was just the sort of middle class thing to do, to get christened, you know. and it didn't mean anything really. Sarah and I were christened at the same time at some trendy church in Kensington. I've got godparents and all that. One left me a whole crate of vintage port. My bloody father drank them lot.
What sort of objects and imagery remind you of your mortality in a safe way?
Oh, everything.
So, for example, like skulls are used.
Well, the Mexicans, because as you know, in Mexico they have the Day of the Dead, don't they? You knew that, did you? Which I think is lovely. It's lovely to celebrate the dead that we've loved, you know. But I don't know, Emily. I don't know.
What do you think is the most ecological funeral you could have?
I don't know. Throw me in the Pacific Ocean.
In the ocean?
Throw me in the ocean. In the deep blue. In the deep blue.
In Hastings and New Haven and Eastbourne, you can actually have a sea burial.
Can you? Like I was in the Navy.
They take you about 5 miles away from the shore, and then they put you in a coffin which is layered with concrete. They wrap your body in fishing wire, chicken wire, and then they bury you in the ocean.
Oh, the fish can have a good snack on you.
Yep, exactly. Although your liver might be a bit toxic.
It was fine. After going 4 months on the wagon, my doctor said my liver's fine, so I had a drink.
Do you know how to plan a funeral, Charles?
When my mother died, my sister did most of the planning. So I put something in the programme, some poetry that my mother liked, and I put that in. I was too shy to talk in front of everyone, so I was too shy and terrified of talking in public, you know.
So do you think there's a way that we should alter our... That's why symbolism is so important.
Symbolism. Yes, well, particularly if you have a faith, I think, and there's a lot of symbolism in faith, isn't there?
Have you ever heard of the Victorian Language Book of Flowers?
No, I never heard of it.
It was pretty much a dictionary which people used all the time in funerals and in death. And they would just place flowers that could represent something that somebody would find difficult to put into words. And also gravestones as well. So if you've ever seen a gravestone which is broken, it means a life was cut too short.
Right.
Or you have crying angels.
And when someone had a road accident, they always, sometimes, particularly on the continent, they have a sort of reef where the terrible tragedy happened.
What sort of things do you think should be on a gravestone?
I always quite found Spike Milligan's one quite funny. Did you hear about that? I told you I was ill. I told you I was ill.
So humour.
I thought that was terribly funny. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about this, Emily. I need planning to answer these questions.
No, it's okay.
I have to think about it. I don't know. I've never been a great one for poetry. I've read a bit of prose in my time, but I haven't read an awful lot of poetry. A nice piece of poetry would seem appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I've written actually some poetry that I'm going to write over the top
That's nice.
of this.
Yeah. That's nice, I mean, I'd like to read it sometime.
Yeah, I'll bring it to you. What do you think of the funeral industry at the moment?
I imagine it's a pretty good business. It's a pretty good racket to get in, isn't it? Funeral. I mean, we all die, don't we?
Yeah,
we all eat.
a good business.
I mean, not a business, it's a service, isn't it? But it's also, and let's face it, it's a pretty good business. always advertising.
Do you think there's any sort of rituals or practices that you would want for your funeral?
I'm a little bit. I don't want Christian prayers really, and you know, at my mother's funeral we had a bit of music. You know, we had. It's not very original. What a wonderful world. We had a bit of music. Sarah read a bit from something, and Emma read a bit, and I just quoted some poetry in the programme. It was just cool. It was a lovely little programme. I wish I still had it actually. Patricia, with a lovely photograph of my mother, and my mother was a bit of an atheist, to be honest, but she was very interested in religions. But she was a bit of an atheist, really. My godmother, who lost her daughter on the back of a motorbike in her early 30s, sadly she's a complete atheist, you know. You know, which didn't help her bereavement, you know.
I suppose religion gives you a sense of immortality.
Yes, it does, yes. As I said when I was a boy, I said, you know, why does everyone make such a sad thing about death when there's a heaven, you know, they go to heaven.
Providing you live your life in a certain way.
Yes, even then, you know, even then. The all-forgiving, so-called all-forgiving God, you know.